during that time, I was just applying for endless jobs, as many as I could in publishing, and I probably wasn't discriminating enough. I did apply. I was so desperate to get a job, I just applied for everything going, and I made a lot of sort of rookie mistakes. One of which I applied for a job at an illustrated books company, and they specialised in gardening and cookery, neither of which I do or know anything about. And inevitably in the interview they said to me, "What's your favourite illustrated book?" And I did have a Jamie Oliver book at home on my shelf. I hadn't read it, but I did have it, and I knew it was popular, and I should have said that. And I panicked, and I talked about a book that my dad gave me when I was about 5, and it was from the 1930s, and I was a tomboy, and it was full of pictures of dead cowboys from the Northwest. I didn't get that job. And I did get endless rejections. I had so many. I lost count, and it was really disheartening. And I did kind of reach sort of my lowest point, and when I'd run out of money. I was living at the very end of the Northern Line, which didn't feel like London. Didn't know if I could afford to stay, and kind of thinking, gosh, all this effort, I don't think it is going to pay off. I don't think it's going to happen. Which, of course, was when I got my first interview, my real interview, which was at Darley Anderson's. And the job they offered me was I went for a rights assistant job. Halfway through the interview, they said, "Oh, the rights manager's actually just left. Do you think you could do that job?" I just said, "Yeah, of course, I'd love to." And then I really panicked afterwards. And they gave me a week's sort of trial period to prove that I could sort of demonstrate some of the skills I'd need for the job. And 3 years later, I'm still there. I'm now head of rights and a literary agent as well. And so the reason I'm kind of saying all of that is that I'm not sort of a stranger to rejection and how that process works. And I do have some understanding of, how that feels when you're kind of pursuing something and probably questioning yourself, and you do face all these knockbacks. So I kind of want to just finish sort of the introduction bit really just by saying that, please remember that we really are on your side, and that you really are kind of the beating heart of our industry, and without new talent, we can't continue, and I can't do my job. So we are on your side. Really.
Oh, that's really lovely.
I don't know if anyone's got any questions about anything I just said. I probably spoke very fast.
Can you tell us a bit more about rights and how they work?
Okay, so if you sell world rights, that means you're selling all rights for that book, or however many books are in that deal. So that's translation, audio, occasionally it could be film and TV, or merchandising even, although that's quite rare. And publishing houses do have great rights teams too, and they will champion their books and try and sell them in translation. The kind of difference, I guess, between your agency and your publishing house handling it, you could argue that some perhaps the bigger houses, who, although they have a big rights team, have a lot of books to sell, whereas an agency probably has a smaller list. If I'm your agent, it's me going to the book fairs personally and pitching your books all over the world. The other thing is about income, really. So if I sell your foreign rights, when your advance comes through from, say, Germany, we would pay that to you straight away. Whereas if your UK publishing house has those rights and they sell your book to Germany, that money is then set against the advance they've already paid you. So you have to wait until you've earned back that advance before you kind of see that money. So it can be good for kind of keeping your income ticking over as well.
Do you think because you do these dual jobs, because I do film and TV, and so when I'm looking at a book, I'm thinking, could this be a film? And I'm not trying to think that, it's just in my head, because if you do 2 jobs. So when you get a book sent to you, are you thinking, is this going to sell around the world? And are you only going to take things on that sell around the world? Or, what's your sort of criteria when you take things on?
I do think that because I came up through rights, it is quite hard to not wear that hat. And my boss did actually talk to me about that, and he did say you're going to have to stop thinking like a rights person all the time, and you're going to have to think about an agent, because the UK does come first most of the time, or sometimes the US.
Yeah.
But I can't help thinking about if books would translate well. Yeah. And I guess the more international appeal that they might have, they do, they're slightly more appealing in that sense. Having said that, I wouldn't not take something on because it was very UK-centric. If I loved it, I'd take it on anyway. Yeah. But I still probably wouldn't sell world rights in it. I'd still want to have a go at the translation rights. Because I feel like I'm not able to do my job, I feel now.
And as an agency, you know, I think you are quite unique that you have an editor in-house, and also that you do take on everything from your, not specific /part.
I know, sorry,
Talent
pile. Yeah, there's so many.
But you are quite unique, because I've heard someone say that before, that it all comes from there, and I was, you know, and that's that is quite unusual as well. And that must be something that comes from Darley.
It is from Darley, and I should have said earlier, but you know, a lot of our authors, especially our initial authors, also didn't have very literary backgrounds at all. And so sometimes, some of our very early authors, well, Martina Cole is a great example. She didn't do great at school. She had a really colourful life. She had an English teacher who kind of she connected with, and she had this one book that she'd written, and I think she wrote it when she was 21, and then put it in a drawer, and then got it back out and sent it in. And you know, I think that Darley's always seen that sometimes the story is there, or the unique voice is there, but you know, it needs a bit of timing or a bit of editorial work, and I think that's why that we decided to take on an editor. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
So I just ask about, just going back to the translation rights. I write children's stories,
Yes.
and they're rhyming stories.
Yes.
Now I know when it comes to translation, that's not an easy sell. But I write what I want to write. I'm really passionate about what I write. So the stories that I've written so far have all felt right to do them in rhyme.
Are they picture books or
yes,
older?
yeah.
So picture books is actually different in that
Okay.
that is the one kind of I guess bracket where we do sell world, because you sort of absolutely have to for that reason, because the publishers will then take them to kind of Bologna and they'll do co-editions and things. Rhyming books are tricky in translation, and sometimes playing on language, it just isn't possible to translate them. That's not to say they wouldn't sell in America though, and so again some of the picture books that we've sold world rights, and then they've taken them to fairs and they'll come out in America. And I do think as well there is a danger of trying to write for the market, you know, if that's how you naturally write, and that's what you want to do.
Exactly.
And obviously there are great rhyming books that sell brilliantly. You know, it would be a shame to kind of not follow your instincts just because you're worried about translation rights, which we actually always say translation rights are kind of like an add-on. They're a sort of lovely extra. It's one of our authors, Tana French, always describes them as sort of having a fairy godmother that kind of drops nice things in her inbox occasionally. And that's kind of a nice way to think about them, because they're not a given, but it is a nice extra on top of your initial deal.
Do you get, as far as the translation goes, then, like, I speak and read several languages, and like I read some terribly translated books, you see what I mean? And then I would feel really hesitant about that.
It is, well, it's an interesting point, because we have had cases where books have been badly translated, and it's not something we have a huge amount of control over, because you sell the book to the foreign publisher, and it's up to them to then translate it. And sometimes when people are offering something, they'll say, I can get this amazing translator who's worked on these and these books, which is, you know, doesn't happen that often, but it's really nice to know. So actually it isn't something that we can do a huge amount about. If we heard a book had been badly translated, then we would obviously talk to that publisher and, you know, say we didn't want that translator to work on that book again. And quite often now, because we are quite a small world, a lot of our authors do have friends who, you know, speak fluent German or French, and they do give them the translations. You can also ask for translations to approve. So Italy, for example, always ask us to approve their translated text before they go to print. And if you've got an author or they know someone that can read fluently, as long as they can do a quick turnaround on it, they can have a look at it as well. Also really helps in terms of foreign publicity. It's a nice bonus. If you could do an interview and have a few words of foreign language, that's always really nice. I should say that I sell translation rights, but I actually don't have any foreign languages. I speak a tiny bit of French, but at the book fairs and things, everything is done in English, which is awful, but it is, and all the contracts are written in English as well for translation rights.
Claire, and how do you go with keeping titles? I've had a couple of authors whose books have been translated into terrible, clunky sounding, completely weird, this is non-fiction titles. Do you have any control at all there?
We do. Well, it depends on the country or on the publisher, I suppose, because sometimes we have lovely relationships with people and they always share the titles, or they ask. So Germany usually ask us if they want to change the title. And sometimes it's because it won't translate and they have to find... I mean, ideally we'd like the title to stay the same, particularly because it can get really confusing for people buying the books on, you know, Amazon and Country and things. So we can battle about it, but there is a certain amount of trust with the foreign publishers as well, and so if they say it doesn't translate and we think this is the best title, without kind of being in their market all the time, it's quite difficult sometimes to judge. But yeah, we do battle it if we can, especially if we're really worried about it.
Now, I know there's a few guidelines on the website about submission risks. Can you narrow it down a little bit? Because I always get confused when they say just send. I ask this question every week, so it's about